The stage lights felt hot against my skin. The polished wood of the podium gleamed beneath them. My name echoed through Mercer Hall, and polite applause rose from the audience as I stepped forward to receive my Master of Business Administration diploma. I smiled for the camera, holding the folder just as the photographer instructed, but my eyes drifted to the right. The row reserved for my family was in plain sight, empty. I shouldn't have been surprised. Still, the image hit me deep inside, a dull thud inside my chest. I had held on to a faint, foolish hope that maybe this time would be different. Maybe they'd set aside whatever excuse they'd concocted and show up for me. But the empty seats told the truth, just like they had for every other milestone they'd missed. The memories filled the void. My 16th birthday, when Bella got a weekend trip to New York for a once-in-a-lifetime dance workshop, while I got a store-bought cake left on the kitchen counter. My high school graduation, when my parents showed up late because they had to take Bella to a photo shoot. The scholarship dinner I attended alone because it's just a formality and they didn't want to take the night off work. Bella was 3 years younger, their golden child. Every whim of hers became a project the whole family rallied behind. My dreams, on the other hand, were met with reminders to be practical, self-sufficient, and not to expect handouts. "Toughen up, Peyton," my father used to say, as if resilience were a coat you could just put on. The dean's handshake lasted just long enough to pull me back to the present. I walked off the stage to the applause of strangers, returning to my seat among the other graduates, the weight of my diploma in my lap. All around me, classmates leaned into cheering families, cameras flashed, flowers were exchanged. I kept my hands folded and my face neutral, already rehearsing the answer I'd give later when someone asked, "Was your family here?" When the ceremony ended, I stepped out into the crisp spring air. My phone began to vibrate. I was halfway down the steps outside the Lowell Memorial Library, diploma still tucked under my arm, when my phone buzzed again. The number was unknown, a Maine area code. For a moment, I almost let it go to voicemail, but something about the timing made me swipe to answer. "Miss Mercer." The voice was deep, measured. "I'm Nathaniel Brand, an estate lawyer in Harbor Bay. I'm calling regarding your grandparents' affairs." My breath caught. My grandparents. I hadn't heard their names, Thomas and Evelyn Blake, spoken aloud in months, not since the quiet memorial service I had mostly organized by myself. "Yes," he continued, "as their sole heir, you have inherited their investment property. We'll need to meet soon to go over the details, but I can tell you now that the estate's current value is approximately $1 million. I stopped moving. All around me, graduates were laughing and posing for photos, but the words $1 million seemed to suck the sound from the air. It wasn't the number so much as the fact that they had chosen me. Deliberately and unequivocally. The images came unbidden. My grandfather in a worn flannel shirt teaching me how to fix a loose fence post. My grandmother's hands dusted with flour as we rolled out pie dough on the old kitchen counter. The two of them reading side by side on the porch, the ocean just beyond the rose garden. From high school through their final years, I had been the one to drive up on weekends, mow the lawn, change the light bulbs, sort their mail. They never asked for much, just company and help with the little things they couldn't do anymore. My parents and Bella rarely came, except for Thanksgiving photos or a quick stop on their way somewhere else. "Miss Mercer," Nathaniel's voice brought me back. "If you can be in Harbor Bay this week, we'll begin transferring control to you." "Yes," I said, the word firm. "I'll be there." We exchanged details, and I ended the call, slipping the phone back into my purse. The spring wind carried a slight chill, but it wasn't the cold that made me grip my diploma tighter. It was the sudden awareness that this gift came with a shadow. I knew my family well enough to understand what would happen once they found out, and I wasn't going to wait for that day to arrive unprepared. 2 days after Nathaniel Brand's call, I was sitting in a glass-walled office in downtown Portland, across from Dominic Clark, a trust attorney a former classmate had recommended. Dominic was in his mid-40s, with calm eyes, the kind of man who spoke sparingly but left no doubt as to his meaning. After I finished outlining my family's history, how borrowing in their vocabulary meant gone forever, and helping to manage was just a step away from taking over, he leaned back in his chair. "If you want to make this airtight," he said, "an irrevocable trust is your best option. Once established, no one, not even you, can ever put the assets back in your personal name. They'll be off the public record, and you'll be the sole trustee." It sounded final and maybe a little ruthless, but finality was what I needed. We spent the next 3 weeks in a whirlwind of signatures, transfers, and notarized seals. Dominic arranged for a limited liability company, owned by the trust, to take title of the Harbor Bay property. Every utility account, every tax record, every insurance policy was moved under that entity's name. The investment accounts my grandparents left were closed. The funds were moved into trust-managed portfolios with dual-factor authentication access that only Dominic and I controlled. The paper trail vanished from Maine. Copies of the original documents went into a locked file in Dominic's office and a safe deposit box in Boston, far from anyone in my family. I told no one, not even my closest friends. The fewer people who knew, the fewer loose threads my family could pull. One night, sitting alone in my apartment, I caught myself wondering if this made me a cold person. To cut them out so completely and preemptively, without a word. It was a kind of severance that couldn't be undone. But then I remembered every time they had watched me struggle to cover my own tuition, every missed milestone, every dismissive comment tossed over their shoulder as they walked away, and I realized being cold was exactly what had kept me alive in that house for years. By the time Nathaniel called to say the estate transfer was officially complete, the lock was already in place. Now all I had to do was wait for them to discover it. It started subtly, almost as if they had all agreed on the same script. A text from Bella. "Saw you were in Harbor Bay last weekend. Thought I might stop by sometime. We should catch up." A call from my mother, her voice overly warm, asking how the new job was going and if I'd had any time to think about the future of the house. The first weekend I was back at the property, my father appeared in the driveway with a toolbox, claiming he'd noticed the porch railing looked loose the last time he drove by. He offered to fix it, no charge. I told him I had it handled. Bella was more persistent. She'd drop by with a tin of cookies or a bouquet of flowers, wandering through the rooms with that bright smile, asking questions that sounded casual but weren't. "Do you still keep the deed in the house? Just curious. I've never seen it." I changed the subject every time. One evening, over dinner in their kitchen, my mother set a roast chicken on the table and launched into a speech about keeping family property in the family. Looking at me, as if I might spontaneously offer to split the inheritance, Bella chimed in, saying how much she'd always loved the place, how she could see herself living there, maybe even renovating. I smiled, nodded, and offered nothing. Every visit, every phone call was a slow press against the edges of my boundaries, testing for a weak spot. They thought I was still the daughter who could be worn down with enough persistence, the sister who would fold to keep the peace, but I made sure to answer every probing comment with a vague, pleasant murmur, giving them the illusion that I hadn't fortified the very ground they so desperately wanted to claim. Their patience was as calculated as mine, and I knew that eventually one of us would decide it was time to make the next move. The morning air was sharp enough to sting my lungs as I swept a handful of maple leaves from the porch. The ocean was restless that day, a low rumble under the constant cry of gulls. I had just leaned the broom against the railing when a familiar black SUV crunched up the gravel driveway. Bella got out first, her hair pulled back perfectly, her expression bright with the kind of confidence that usually meant she thought she'd already won. My parents followed, my mother clutching a slim folder, my father moving with that slow, deliberate stride he used when he wanted to look like he was in control. "Morning, Peyton," Bella called, walking toward me. "Just wanted to let you know, this house is in my name now." She said it all in one breath, as if she couldn't wait to drop the news. "Mom and Dad think it's best you move out this week. I've already got a potential buyer." I didn't flinch. Not really. My father stepped forward, pulling a sheaf of papers from the folder. "Your grandparents' will had an error. Technically, the property should have been left to both you and your sister. We worked with a lawyer to correct it and had the title transferred to her to make it easier to manage." He held the papers out to me as if expecting me to take them gratefully. I glanced at them. At first blush, they might have fooled someone who didn't know what to look for. A blue ink stamp in the corner, signatures in looping cursive. But the stamp's design was wrong. The notary number was incomplete, and the signatures were shaky and inconsistent. Bella smiled like a real estate agent about to close a deal. "Don't you worry, I'll handle everything. We can have movers here in a week." I let the moment hang, watching the certainty in their eyes, memorizing every detail. The date printed at the top, the name of the supposed notary, even the faint watermark that didn't match county records. "I've heard you," I finally said, my voice even. Then I stepped back, letting them think they had planted their flag. They left, looking satisfied. I stayed on the porch until the SUV disappeared, already knowing I wouldn't have to wait long for their next move. 2 days later, the crunch of tires on gravel came earlier than I expected. A white moving truck arrived first, followed closely by the black SUV. From the passenger seat, Bella hopped out in a fitted tracksuit, phone in hand, her eyes alight with anticipation. My parents followed, my father with a fixed smile, my mother already gesturing toward the porch, as if directing a play. Behind me, Aiden Kelly, the county property clerk, stood in an impeccably pressed navy suit, a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. We had spoken the night before. He'd reviewed every document in the trust and agreed to meet here in person. Now he waited, silent and steady, as I crossed my arms over my chest. The movers had barely reached the walkway when they slowed, taking in the scene. My father tried to push forward, papers in hand, but Aiden made himself visible, opening his portfolio and pulling out a document stamped with the county seal. "Mr. and Mrs. Mercer, Miss Bella Mercer," he said, his voice clear enough to carry to the truck. "I'm here on behalf of the county records office. As of last April, this property was transferred into an irrevocable trust under the sole trusteeship of Miss Peyton Mercer. Any attempted property transfer after that date is legally void and may constitute fraud." Bella blinked rapidly. "Fraud? We corrected an error in the will." Aiden didn't even look at her. "Our records show the paperwork you filed used an unlicensed notary and was processed through an out-of-state service flagged for fraudulent filings. This is your official warning. Any further attempts to claim this property without authorization will be referred for a criminal investigation." The movers exchanged glances, then started backing toward their truck. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. My father folded the papers slowly, as if buying time, before turning sharply toward the SUV. Bella lingered a moment longer, her expression hardening. "You're going to regret this," she said under her breath. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. As the engines faded down the drive, Aiden handed me my copy of the notice, his gaze steady. "They won't forget this." "Neither will I." And I knew the quiet that followed wouldn't last. 3 mornings after the porch confrontation, I found a thick envelope jammed into my apartment mailbox. The return address was for a Portland law firm I'd never heard of, but the name on the line below was instantly familiar: Savannah Mercer. Inside was a 4-page letter printed on heavy cream stock. The language was polished, but the demands were anything but subtle. $150,000 in cash for emotional compensation, joint ownership of the Harbor Bay property with Bella, and a monthly stipend until further notice to ensure the family's long-term well-being. The letter accused me of causing irreparable harm to maternal and sisterly bonds by keeping the estate entirely in my name. I read it twice, then set it aside and picked up my phone. If they wanted to take this to the legal field, I would meet them there. Aubrey Bass saw me that afternoon. Her office was on the 15th floor of a downtown building, the walls lined with framed victories from trust and probate cases. She listened without interruption as I laid out the letter, the forged documents, and the attempted takeover of the house. Her response was immediate. "We send a cease and desist letter, direct, documented, and final. They have no standing, not with that trust in place, and we find proof of who filed those forged papers. Within 48 hours, the letter was on its way to my mother's lawyer and her home address. It cited the trust's legal protections, warned against further harassment, and made it clear that any future attempts would trigger civil and potentially criminal action. Aubrey's investigator didn't take long to find the trail. The forged transfer had been filed through a property registration service, flagged in multiple states for fraudulent activity. The name attached to the filing, Bella Mercer. The notary number didn't exist in the state registry. Seeing it in black and white left me with a cold, steady anger. The county clerk's warning on the porch had been generous. They could have walked away. Instead, they doubled down. I left Aubrey's office with the report in my bag, wondering if maybe this would be enough to stop them. But deep down, I knew my family too well to believe it was over. The first sign came from an unexpected place, a text from my cousin Paisley. "You need to hear this." She sent an audio file and my mother's voice filled my kitchen, low and deliberate. "I don't want to speak ill of her," Savannah said, "but Peyton took advantage of my father when he was weak. Everyone knows he wasn't thinking clearly when he signed those papers." Paisley didn't stop. Screenshots from a group chat followed. My mother was telling the same story to a circle of relatives, with Bella chiming in about family fairness and ulterior motives. A few cousins even jumped in, speculating on whether I'd forged signatures, twisting the truth into something unrecognizable. I forwarded everything to Aubrey. She didn't hesitate. "They're trying to turn this into a reputational war. If you let this sit, every move you make will be viewed through that lens. We fight back with facts, publicly." For 2 days, we drafted a 12-page statement of facts with every date and document aligned. The creation of the trust, the property transfer, the trail of the fraudulent filing with Bella's name on it, and the county records that disproved every single accusation. I sent it to every relative in that group chat and anyone else my mother had tried to sway. The subject line was simple: the complete truth. The apologies started trickling in within hours. Some were short, just a few words acknowledging they'd been wrong. Others came with long explanations about how convincing my mother had sounded. Not everyone changed their mind. A few doubled down, accusing me of airing the family's dirty laundry, but the momentum had shifted. The lies no longer stood unanswered. By the end of the week, the silence from my mother's camp felt heavier than any response. I knew they were regrouping. The news of Bella's new job came from a mutual acquaintance who thought it was great we were both doing so well. A quick search confirmed it. She had joined a luxury real estate firm, one known for priding itself on ethics and client trust. I didn't waste time. Aubrey and I compiled the documents from the forged transfer, the verification of the invalid notary stamp, and the fraud warning from the county into a single indexed file. I sent it to the firm's ethics department with a brief note. "This concerns your employee, Bella Mercer, and her involvement in attempted real estate fraud." 3 days later, the firm fired her. The case was referred to the state licensing board, which opened a formal review. That's when the counterattack came. Bella hired a lawyer with a reputation for aggressive PR strategies. He framed my actions as malicious interference in a young professional's career, feeding sympathetic quotes to a local business blog. Aubrey was ready. We sent the licensing board certified copies of every court-sealed document, including the cease and desist, the investigative report linking the fraudulent filing to Bella, and the county clerk's statement from the porch confrontation. The board acknowledged receipt, confirming the evidence would remain in the case file. The PR noise faded once the facts were on the table. I could almost hear the silence on their side, tense, calculated, waiting for the next angle. I knew it would come, and I knew I couldn't afford to look away when it did. 2 months later, a plain white envelope arrived with the return address of a Salem law firm. Inside, the letter was brief. All claims against me were withdrawn. No further contact would be made, except where legally necessary. I read it once, then folded it neatly and placed it in my file. No triumph, no gloating, just the quiet certainty that a chapter had closed. That weekend, I drove up to Harbor Bay. The gravel drive curved toward the house, maple leaves blazing in autumn colors, the sea stretching out silver beyond. Inside, the air held the faint scent of old wood and the lavender diffuser I'd left out months ago. I walked slowly through each room, my hand brushing the red brick walls, the photographs, the worn armchair by the window. In the stillness, my grandfather's voice seemed to echo. Protect what's worth keeping. I understood now that he meant more than the property. It was my right to choose who could reach me, my ability to keep my dignity intact, my peace uninterrupted. On the porch, I watched the horizon until the light began to fade, knowing that I would be the one to decide which doors remained closed from now on.